Mr. Paul Downs. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Dom?
I'm super duper. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
I love that art on your back wall, as we spoke about before.
Yeah, my wife paints those, and I have a rotating set of paintings I put up there depending on the mood.
On the
As
mood,
to-
yeah.
yeah,
Yours are framed as well. My daughter's a prolific painter, but
yeah,
we haven't taken to framing them all because she's just producing so many right now. We're running out of wall
yeah.
space.
Yeah, well, wait till the daughter is 60 years old, and you've got a whole house full of paintings everywhere, which is what my house looks like. Yeah,
I love it. It's very
yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Paul, hey, listen, we're on the Cabinet Maker Profit System show. People
hmm
maybe know who you are. So Paul, who the heck are you? And why are you talking to this group of architect and millworkers and cabinet makers all around the world?
Well, my company, I mean, my name is Paul Downs. I own a company called Paul Downs Cabinetmakers, which I started in 1986 when I was 22 years old.
Mm.
And just to dispense with what we do everything but make cabinets. I took that name when I was starting sort of as a copycat of Thomas Moser, who is a
Mm.
furniture maker that I think maybe a lot of your listeners might know who he is.
Right.
And I was very inspired by his story. And when I got out of college, I decided I was just going to make furniture like him. And so I named my business that. And one of the decisions I made very early on was to not do anything but furniture. Like I made one kitchen once and I hated it so much. I was like, I am not doing that again. That really was not much fun. And
Didn't fill your soul.
didn't fill my soul. So I have always been a furniture guy.
Mm.
And I started off doing any kind of furniture anybody would want, but pretty quickly developed a specialty in dining room furniture, particularly chairs and large tables that had integral leaf mechanisms so that they would be very easy to open and close. Because my clients back then asked me, is there any way that we don't have to go get the leaves out from under the bed or out of the attic in
Yeah.
order to put them in the table? So I figured out a couple ways to do that and built a reasonably successful small shop by the mid 90s. Had 5 guys, 6 guys. We would be doing
those kinds of
just
tables
doing
and
furniture.
Wow.
Yes,
Great.
and one of the things I'll say that I'm a pretty good craftsman in terms of gluing together the wood and actually doing the work, but I'm a very good designer and
Mm.
I'm a very good salesperson. So that when I got a client in my office, I was able to listen to them and come up with a design that was good for them and then actually get them to write a check.
Right.
And I think that those are underappreciated
Those are very important. You have to get buy-in and
abilities.
then get paperwork
Not
signed.
a given for a lot of craftsmen. And a lot of craftsmen would much rather be out there with the sawdust than trying to
Mm.
get money out of people. But that's something that I could do. So the business was reasonably successful. In 2002, I took a partner on, and the following year, we had sort of a very unexpected event, which was that I had one picture of a boardroom table on my
Mhm.
website that I'd put up in 1999. We had one client who asked for one table,
Yeah.
built a boardroom table, put a picture of it up on the website. And in 2003, Google found that picture and decided that that was going to be the top search result for everybody who was searching for boardroom table in the whole world. And
Unbelievable.
I had nothing to do with it. It just happened one day.
Yeah.
And I remember very clearly the first phone call I got was a guy from South Dakota who was asking me, can you build me a boardroom table? And I was like, who
Why
are
are you
you?
calling me from?
Why are you calling me from where? Because we were a Philadelphia company. I did a little business in Washington and New York, but basically Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So the idea that somebody in South Dakota wanted me to build a boardroom table was mind blowing. And a couple of days later, I was on the phone with someone in Kyrgyzstan who was putting up an oil company headquarters
Of
and
course he
wanted a
was.
boardroom table. And the calls and emails just have kept coming ever since then.
Wow.
We get anywhere from 3 to 10 every day. Now, it's been years and years, so we have figured out how to work with Google to try to optimize that traffic stream, because it was apparent even back then that this was a much better business than being in residential furniture. The people who were calling had a lot of money, and it wasn't their money, so they didn't care all that much.
That's the best combination right there.
And all of the business happened during business hours, as opposed to me having to go out and meet with people in the evening and weekends.
Right.
And so my partner and I decided to go all in on boardroom tables, and we made a successful transition out of residential into boardroom. And that's what we've been doing ever since. So Paul Downs Cabinetmakers, we don't make cabinets, we make big conference tables. The company has grown from little old me in 1986 to the point we now have 24 people. Wow. We're going to do about 4.5 million this year, and that would be maybe 150 different orders. We work with everybody because Google brings you everybody who types that search string into the box is going to see our site. And that's a wide range of potential clients. It's not just fancy people with a ton of money or big organizations, although it includes them. It goes all the way down to a little local church who is looking for a table for their meeting room, or a small school board, or an Indian tribe, or someone who owns a successful small company it could be anybody. Like, we really deal with everybody. And we had to figure out ways of identifying which of those incoming calls had the potential to be good clients for us. Right. And then we put them through a process where my sales team first has a conversation with them to qualify them as clients.
I love it.
And then if they do, then they start working with my design engineers, who actually work extensively with the client to come up with a custom design, price it, and then they close the deal. Now, we were fortunate that when Google put us in this business, at the same time, a set of tools were appearing that allowed us to have conversations with people far away in a credible way. In particular, SketchUp, which I think a lot of your listeners probably know what that is, but it's a 3D modeling software package that was easy to use and at the time was free. And I had a person on my staff in those years who said, hey, we should use SketchUp. And she downloaded the program, sort of figured out how to get started. So we've been using that ever since as a way to show people what they're going to get. And we've developed very sophisticated material libraries and rendering capabilities where we can show people, here's what your room is going to look like. And we'll take photographs of their room and build a model. And here's what your table will look like in there.
Virtual has been a part of your business really since the internet took off. You said your second phone call was Kyrgyzstan, your first one was South Dakota. So virtual right out of the gate. You probably adapted very well to when we all had to go into.
That's at the sales end of it. The virtual is pretty easy. You have to learn how to use the program. You have to learn how to generate images that clients can understand. You have to have a consistent pricing system, which is a complicated spreadsheet that I wrote. And then the other piece of the business that is not so simple is actually getting the giant, delicate thing that we built from our shop into the client space without destroying it.
And do you use specialty installers on site, or can it be installed by a regular cabinetry company?
Anybody who's reasonably handy could do most of our tables. We do occasionally make some that are extremely complex and that require a little more in the way of skills. But most of our tables are designed to be really easy to put together because that's what we needed to do. If we were just building something in a way that only we understood, and then you ship it to Seattle or something and drop it on a local installer and they're like, how does this go together? That's a recipe for disaster. So we went back and took all the joinery and everything that we were doing for furniture and rethought it as if it was the only goal was to make it easy to put together. And so everything that we used to do into IKEA kit, except better than IKEA.
Except better than IKEA. I've seen your stuff.
We give you instructions that have words. And so with that, the goal was when the installer opens the boxes in the client's room, and the client is always hovering around nervously looking at them.
Top and the legs.
Yeah, I mean, they want to see the whole thing, and the installer has never seen any of our work. We want them, as soon as they start opening the box, to be like, oh, this is the best day I'm ever going to have.
So you think about even the packaging when it's being delivered?
Everything. I mean, one of our mottos is that the company exists for two things: craftsmanship, which is what we deliver to our clients, and prosperity, which is what we take from our clients and distribute to the people who work here. Okay. So craftsmanship is something that you can apply to any situation. So I see the initial picking up the phone. What do you say when you answer it? That's craftsmanship. Everybody says the same thing. This is Paul Don's Cabinetmakers. I'm Paul. Can I help you? And then the conversation that my sales guy has with the client has been scripted and practiced and reviewed. That's craftsmanship. When we send out an email, it's spell checked. It doesn't have any emojis in it or anything. It's standard English. It's written correctly. That's craftsmanship. When we have a meeting with the team, we have an agenda. We sort of know what to do. We don't waste time. That's craftsmanship.
You have an agenda for your meetings, Paul?
We do.
What's this craziness you speak
I know, it's weird. When we put something in a cardboard box, the box has to be good. It has to fit. It has to have labels on it. That's craftsmanship. So craftsmanship everywhere. And that makes life a lot easier in our business. Yeah. And then the prosperity thing is maybe we'll talk a little bit more after I've done introducing myself. Is really why I want to be in business, which is to make sure that everybody who works in this company is living a decent middle-class lifestyle, is able to get married and buy a house and go on vacation and have kids.
Do all those things, yeah.
Maybe even send them to college. I can't control that cost, but everybody who works here should be part of that team that's benefiting from their efforts. So I think that'll give your people an idea of who I am at this point.
It does. It does. Well, and the reason that we're here today is to take that background and experience that you have, and it's a great story. It's got a story arc of, you started doing something, realized it wasn't your favorite thing, so you went into something you loved more, and then the world gave you even more of it, and you found a special niche, a special place in there.
Now, I do want to say that story sounds lovely, but that there were a lot of fraught moments, and I'm not a really great businessman. It took me many, many years to get to the point where my businesses made any money. And we were always growing. And if you get deposits from a client as you grow, you can kind of run a continual Ponzi scheme where you're losing money on operations, but you're growing sales. And so you can keep the cash flowing. And it took me a long time to figure out exactly where I was going wrong. And I had some very, very tense years in the middle of that. So
I appreciate that you said that, because it's so easy to gloss over the hard times. I can gloss over an entire decade of my life by saying, so I sold that company and moved on. Right. But what you didn't hear there was the sleepless nights, the difficult conversations with my wife, the nights I didn't get to see my family because I was traveling to put a deal together or close something, maybe a little bit more mac and cheese than a family should be eating in a row because we're trying to pull things together. And you gloss it over, or I gloss it over with a statement, so I sold that company and moved on. Right. And it's so easy to just put aside all the difficulties that are there. But really, those difficulties, second by second as they tick by, it can feel like an eternity.
Yeah, I've always found that there's no real separation between my business life and my personal life, that the stress of business came home and the stress of home came to work with me. In my situation, when my first children were twins, and this was in 1994, and it turned out that one of the twins had special needs, very severely autistic. And so that definitely had an impact on my ability to do work. I needed to be home every day for dinner. And then I would walk in and my wife would throw a couple of kids at me like, I've had it with these guys.
Yeah.
And you're on now. And so I've always reserved energy for my home life in a way that I think had a definite impact on the success of the business. Because I've never been one of these guys who is willing to put in 80, 90 hours a week and just, brute force your way through a lot of problems. And it slowed down the business growth to a large extent. And I
we're
guess
all in
that's
business
a
for personal
takeaway for your
reasons.
people is that everybody's got some drama in their personal life. And if it's drifting over into your business, I don't think that that's something to be ashamed of. People don't like to talk about it, which is a different thing. But if we could acknowledge that that's reality, everybody would at least be starting a conversation from a place that is real and that acknowledges those difficulties.
I've encountered that situation a lot in dealing with business owners. And one of the most impactful ones I ever heard was I asked, just having a regular conversation with a guy. I said, why do you want to be successful, or why do you want to change the business? Oh, I want more money. Okay. How many times do I hear that answer? Why do you want more money? And it didn't take very long before he told me that his mom was in a home and all he could afford was a shared quad, like 4 people to a room for her. His other brothers and sisters weren't contributing at all. And he went on to say that his mom couldn't sleep at night because another lady in the room had dementia and she would yell and scream and walk around all night. He just said, my mom deserves better. And I need to make this business, make enough money so my mom can get a private room. And that was the driver for this guy. It's so simple, like not complicated, but it took me slowing down to ask the right question. Why? Why do you want to do this? And then truthfully for him to just come out and say it and, in a safe place with me. And then so much can get accomplished when all the BS is out of the way, that this is actually what we're trying to do here.
Well, when he was candid too, you got a completely different picture of him, right?
Yeah,
because if someone says, I want to make more money,
it's a thin answer. Who cares?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody wants to make more money. Why? So you can put it up your nose, or so you can buy another F-150, or are you in a more altruistic? Like that's information that makes people want to help him, right?
Yeah. So we're all in business for personal reasons. And you know what? At the end of the day, you're a dad. I'm a dad. And you put value on that. And maybe the business could look different if you didn't have, family pressures, but we all have family pressures. And so your business looks exactly like it needs to look.
Yeah.
And you're a good dad.
I hope.
I'm taking your word for it.
I think I'm a good dad, actually.
I think you are. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is how you do things a little bit differently than everybody else. There's some things that you aren't necessarily following the textbook, if you will, and maybe we can explore that a bit.
Yeah, and to preface that, just before we started recording, Dom and I were talking about what we could talk about today, and I said, seems to me that your podcast has sort of 2 things going on. One is the stuff that everybody needs to hear over and over again, like going to church. Like you need to be cash flow positive, like whatever the basic lessons of business that it never hurts to hear over again. And then there's the things that I do that are very strange, that every time I tell someone I do them, they're like, are you out of your mind? Like, why would you do that? So the number one thing that I've always been a stickler for is sharing financial information about how the company is doing with my employees, and really getting.
As soon as you say that, people are putting their hand on the steering wheel and yelling, what? You got to be crazy.
Well, let me finish.
Tell us more about it. Yeah.
I actually did not do this for a very long time. So I've been in business 36 years now. And for the first 25, I did not really share any information with my employees. And as a matter of fact, until 2010, I never had a regular meeting with my employees. So from 1986 to 2010, I think I had less than 5 occasions where I brought the whole crew in and talked to them about anything for any reason.
Interesting.
And that was just ignorance on my part. And I had someone who complained to me one day and said, I never know what's going on. I never know what's going on with this company and blah, blah, blah. And it actually took me a couple of years to process that. But started talking to them regularly in 2010. And this was a suggestion I received from, here's a whole nother thing we haven't gone into, but for a number of years, I blogged about my business for the New York Times. And for 4.5 years, I was a regular columnist in their online business section. And I got a lot of feedback from readers who were like, oh, you're an idiot for these reasons, and here's a bullet point list.
Yeah, so nice that they have
and they were usually right too. And somebody said, you never meet with your people? Why not? You should be having regular meetings. So I was like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So in 2010, when we were just coming out of the big recession, I decided that I was going to start doing that. And I decided that what I wanted to do was share what kept me awake at night, which was, had we sold anything the previous week, and how much cash we had on hand. You know, what was our backlog, what were the sales, and what was the cash position?
Yeah.
Because that's what I worried about all the time. Those are like, that was my life. Did we sell? Did we get paid? And are we going to run out of work this month or next month? And so I decided to just lay that on my people and tell them. And the interesting thing was that at first, nobody had any idea that I even worried about this. They just sort of assumed work would show up.
And they never thought about. You probably took home thousands of dollars a week on every big job.
Well, we'll get there. But the first thing was they had no idea how much money was going in and out of the company every week. Just as a cash flow proposition. You know, back then we were spending, I don't know, $9,000-10,000 a day, and we're doing 2.5 million or whatever it was. And so I just said that, okay, we're going to do 2 million this year, and it works out to $10,000 a day, and the jaws all drop. $10,000 a day. Like, I'm used to that amount of money because I've been watching it for years. But for your average cabinet maker, that's a pretty big piece of change.
You're giving away lottery tickets every day.
Yeah, they did not realize that when they threw that piece of plywood in the trash or something, that's $40. And just the, you know, wasting time for an hour shooting the shit with somebody, that's hundreds of dollars. They just had never had that presented to them as like, okay, here's what's actually happening. And then eventually I got to more detail, showing them a chart of accounts and a P&L and reviewing it with them and saying, okay, here's where we're spending money. This has how much goes to labor, blah, 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 blah. And that's when the discussion about, well, how much money are you making came up. And I decided to just tell them. As a matter of fact, I wrote a column in the Times, and I told everybody who reads the New York Times exactly how much money I made in the previous years. And when I showed that column to my editor there, he was like, are you sure you want to do this? And I showed it to my wife. She's like, you can't do that. And everybody's like, you can't do that. And I did it, and absolutely nothing bad happened. It's not an unreasonable amount of money, for one thing.
Sure.
But what I found is that the employees who saw that had all assumed I was making way more. Like, if a company sells $2 million a year, they figure that the owner is taking home 1.75 million.
Exactly. Yeah. Somewhere close to $2 million.
There may be no evidence to that. You know, like, I drive a used Prius, but they still, they'll, if you don't give them the proper facts, they'll make something up. Yeah. And what they make up is going to be way worse for you than just telling them the truth.
Yeah.
And so I've taken that philosophy and continued to do that ever since. And the most I've ever made out of the company is maybe 300,000 in the course of a year, which to me, you know, like, for a $4 million company, that seems perfectly reasonable.
If I had to go buy you as a president on the open market for a $4 million company, that's probably around the range.
Exactly. I'm
250 or 3. Yeah.
I'm not doing anything evil, and they're all well paid, and they're making more money than they would make anywhere else, and it's a good place to work. So I just don't feel bad about that. Even if I doubled it, I wouldn't feel bad about it. And if I was a different business with a different business model, where maybe it's an ice cream stand and I'm hiring teenagers for minimum wage for the summer, and they're making $7 an hour and I'm making $2 million out of it, I wouldn't do this. I'm not saying that telling that story to your employees is universally a good idea, because there are situations where it could lead to bad feelings and jealousy or them justifying whatever they steal from you. And but with my particular crew and my particular business and my particular income, I feel like this is the way to go. So that's one thing I do. The other thing that I do is I try to write down we're deep into the culture statement. And I think you've probably talked about this with some of your guests, that the idea that a good company culture beats anything. And I've come to believe that after sort of resisting the idea for many years, and then sat down and wrote out a whole set of guidelines of what we expect from employees.
So you put it out there for them and said, this is what it means to work at Paul Down.
It's on the wall. Yeah, like if you work here, these are the rules.
What happened when you put those rules out? How did the guys take it?
They liked it, because what it does is it's if you think about it, you go to work every day, you're playing a game, right? There's something going on that there's expectations you have to conform to. There's ways to win, there's ways to lose. If nobody tells you what the actual rules of the game are,
thank you.
What kind of game you playing?
Well, you're going to play the game that you make up or what you think is best, but nobody's told you what the rules are. Yeah.
Yeah, or you're gonna get the rules from like the crusty guy at the next work station who's working at a heroin addiction or something. It's like, you don't need to go into work, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
You don't need to do this, or the boss doesn't care about that. You start getting information from wherever you get it. And my feeling is, well, this is my company. I want them to play by my rules. And they're a reasonable set of rules. It's basically all a version of the golden rule. And, treat each other well and treat your clients well and be honest and, detail beyond that. But that's mostly what it is. But when you lay them out there and say, here's what it is, and it's in the company handbook and they have to sign that they acknowledge it, it gives you a framework for enforcing the culture. If somebody starts to drift off track, the first thing is to remind them, hey, these are the rules, and what you're doing is not conforming. And then it can form the basis for a formal warning and discharge procedure if you want to go that route.
Yeah.
But I've found that the key thing being that everybody who's on the team has expectations of what their team members are going to be like. And here's an explicit declaration of these things are okay and these things are not okay.
Yeah.
And if somebody takes you aside and starts screaming personal insults to you, that's not okay. And you have recourse. That's, you can come to me and I'll do something about it. But you don't have to wonder whether that's okay. There's so many situations where just some guidance from the company as to what we tolerate and what we don't makes all the difference in the world. For instance, we have flex time because my people have a lot of different commutes and some of them have kids they got to get to school and what have you. And I decided I don't ever want to have to worry about clocking somebody in and yelling at them if they're 5 minutes late. So we have flex time, but we needed to lay out a set of expectations as to what that looks like. And in our case,
because you have a production, you're still trying to build your product on time and on budget, and people are in a flow of, so how do you deal with that?
Well, what we did was the expectation is that you have the ability to set your own schedule, but that it should be something that you regularly do. Like you can say, I'm going to be here at 7:30 every day. You should be here at 7:30 every day. And the next guy can be here at 8:15 every day. And he should be there at 8:15 every day. And yeah, stuff happens. So maybe there's traffic or whatever, you might be late and it's up to you to make up the hours, but there should be a broad predictability to when you're here. And we have a big board on the wall where everybody could write what they expect their schedule to be for each day. And so that we can glance at it and it's like, okay, he's supposed to be here. And just have some idea of whether it's within boundaries or not. The other thing is that if somebody's going to be deviating from that schedule, they do need to notify both the shop floor supervisor and me. And so that there's a duty to notify and a duty to communicate and not just disappear.
Yeah.
And there's more to it, but those are the basic things.
Yeah. So what you've done is you've introduced a set of rules, like you said, and sometimes people will say, but rules are so constricting. And I'll come back and I'll say, I don't think so. If football is loaded with rules, but look at the creativity in the plays that two football teams can put in place. Two very, leading football teams can be ultimately creative, but they're all operating from the same rule book. And so we can do the same thing in our business as you've laid out there.
Well, I think the other thing about rules is that rules are like you're on the highway and you've got a guardrail on one side and you've got a guardrail on the other side. But then the middle, that's where you drive, right? So that if you're familiar with the rules and you're comfortable with what is ordinary working procedure, you're not going to have someone suddenly throw the yellow flag on the ground in front of you if you're conforming to the rules. I see rules as freedom in a way because they tell you what's okay. And they allow the company to settle into a pattern of how to deal with each other that's amenable to everybody. So like we've defined these behaviors and we're going to get used to doing that. And then that's just it. You don't have to think about it anymore. Just say hello to the people, show up on time, it's basic things that work. And we don't have to argue about whether those are still okay or not okay, or someone's at the border of screwing up. Like it's pretty clear where the guardrails are.
Yeah. Are these guardrail concepts in your book? Because I understand you wrote a book as well.
Some of them, but the book kind of predates my thinking on that. So the book, here, I'll hold it up, is a book that I wrote.
Boss Life.
Boss Life, yeah. This is a book I wrote in 2014 and 2015, and it's actually about the events the company went through in the year 2012, which was a bad business year. We started off in reasonably good shape. Made money the year before, and I thought, well, I finally got this whole thing figured out. And after a couple of months, the inquiry stream, the number of people Google was sending us suddenly collapsed.
Oh, so one of your lead sources didn't...
The lead source suddenly stopped producing.
Oh boy.
And it's Google, so it's not like you can appeal to them or talk to them.
There's nothing you can do. They want it's your call.
Well, I was on my own to try to figure out, well, what had I done to make this happen? And we did get out of it eventually. But the point of the book was to take my readers through the whole year of my life where I dealt with that, and I dealt with employees doing various things, and I dealt with my autistic son, and I dealt with sending one of the other ones off to college, and just to try to paint a realistic picture of what it's like to run a small business. Because in my experience of writing for the New York Times, I was doing a lot of writing, but always about sort of one little subject at a time.
Right.
So I would write a column and it would be about, oh, I had to buy health insurance. So here's how you buy health insurance, or here's how I bought health insurance.
Yeah.
And it always put a boundary around every subject.
Yeah, and you have so many words, you're doing an 800-word article, and that's it. Yeah.
It's like sitcoms, right? There's a little lesson in every one. And I knew from having done that for years that that's not at all what it's like to run a business. And I had never read a book or seen a book that really conveyed the experience of being in charge of some small, struggling business and being a boss who doesn't know what to do all the time. And you walk in the morning and you've got a plan for what you want to do, but then bad news starts arriving and you're always playing a lot of defense and you're always reacting to situations. And so that your ability to execute any plan is always being kind of overrun by events coming in. Like that was my experience as being a boss. And when I had an opportunity to write a book, I decided, you know what, that's the book I've always wanted to read about someone who had to deal with that. Like, how did they do it?
Yeah.
And I've never found that book, so I'm going to write it. And so that's what I did. And it's a book that has been in continuous print since 2015. But the interesting thing is that I still get an email, usually every week, from someone anywhere around the world who's read it, and said, "Oh my God, thank you so much," because I thought I was the only one who had this kind of trouble. They could be in any business. I mean, literally any business and literally anywhere in the world. And just that acknowledgement that it's not easy, that it's tough, and that there's no bright line between business and work, and that you're going to be struggling for money, and customers can drive you crazy, and your employees, some of them are good.
Why do we do it? Yeah. Yeah.
But just to have someone say, like, I thought I was alone for many, many years. And then when I started writing for the Times, I realized I wasn't. And then when I put this book out, I heard from so many more people who were just like, I thought I was the only one. I thought I would do this, 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 and this, and then I end up to be Jeff Bezos, right? It's just stepping stones. And if you didn't make it up the steps, that's because you've got a problem. And I would say, no, it's because it's hard and because there's a lot of stuff you can't control. And don't feel bad if you can't master business, because business is very difficult. And some businesses are way more difficult than others. I mean, the thing that really struck me actually was getting a letter from a young woman who was living in Texas. Her family is from Lebanon, and she suddenly had to go back to Lebanon and take over the family business, which was a pharmacy in a little town in the mountains outside Beirut. And so she's good English. It was in college in Texas. Suddenly she's back running the family business, and it's that's a pretty harsh transition. And Lebanon is not a place that's easy to do business. And somehow she found my book. I don't know how she found it, but she read it, and then she wrote me a letter that said, you really saved my life here. That I was just struggling to get my head around the enormity of, I've got sick parents, and I'm doing business in a country which is in the middle of a civil war, and it's just like it couldn't possibly be worse. And your story made me feel better. I was like, I can't compare to that, but I'm so glad I did. I mean, it's just like, that's the power of just sharing something honestly. And it gets back to all the other things I've talked about. Like, why do I tell people what I make? Because I think that there's more to be gained from an honest conversation about what business owners can make than everybody assuming fiction, people making the number too high or too low.
In a vacuum, people make up their own stories.
Right? And when we start to tell each other the truth and talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about, then you get to actually being able to help each other.
Paul, if this has just been great, you've got the book, and if somebody wants to find you in the wide world, how do they reach out and find out more or learn more about you or get your book?
Well, you can contact me directly. The book is on Amazon. I'll hold it up again, Boss Life. And is that in focus?
It's in focus. Is that a broken pencil on there? Is that
It's a broken pencil.
Yeah. Okay.
And I got to say that when readers who are younger than 30 look at this, they're like, what does that mean? And readers who are older understand the whole symbolism of chewing on your pencil.
Chewing your pen and breaking it out of frustration.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's on Amazon. It's easy to get a copy. It's an ebook. It's an Audible. It's all those things. And if you struggle with business and you want to hear about someone else struggling with it, I encourage you to take a look. You can also reach out to me directly. I always have time to help people who ask a question. So my email is pauldowns@pauldowns.com. Couldn't be much easier.
Couldn't be much easier than that.
I like talking to people, and I feel like I've received a ton of help over the years from people who are generous with their time, and I'm always happy to pay it forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Great story, great series of stories, and you've got a very strong and confident approach to how you run your business. And you also, even though you're strong and confident, you're willing to take outside feedback and you make those changes as you go and you keep evolving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Paul. And by the way, anybody who hasn't gone to look at your website, it's just incredible, the board and tables you make. And just the fact that it's a thing.
Like, I've built maybe one conference table with my own hands. Everything you see up there is the work of my team and the genius of the guys doing the designing and of the whole crew doing the whole thing. So they deserve the credit for that.
Well, there you go. Your great leader gives the honor to his crew. So
thank you.
Another great takeaway. All right, Paul, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. And maybe we'll have you back in the future as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.